Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cinema Flow podcast. I'm your host, Zach Abdulbaki, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. He's an Australian actor who you can see on the big screen in the new film Beast from Lionsgate. It will be released in cinemas on April 10th in the United States and April 23rd in Australia. Daniel plays Patton James, a fisherman who is pulled back into the world of MMA when his brother is severely injured. Reuniting with his former coach, Sammy, played by Russell Crowe, he commits to one final fight against a brutal opponent, Xavier Gra. It's a fantastic movie. It's super entertaining and demands to be seen on the big screen with an audience. Now I am honored to welcome the star of Beast to the podcast, the one and only Mr. Daniel MacPherson. Welcome to the show, Daniel. How are you doing today?
Hello, mate. I'm doing very well, Zach. Thanks for having me, mate.
Of course. Thank you for taking the time. If you can't tell, I love the film. For all the listeners out there, could you please tell us more about your character, Patton James, and what his role in the story is?
Whoa. Patton James had come from a life of fighting. He was a champion fighter. He'd come up through MMA and succeeded at the highest level. And we start the film, 10 years in the past, and you see Patton at the peak of his powers with Russell Crowe's Sammy, getting prepped for a big fight, which is a scene that still gives people goosebumps, all around the world when they're seeing it in some of these screenings and some of these preview screenings. It's been very satisfying. But Patton, 10 years later, we find him. He's a husband. He's a father. He's an expectant dad. He's got a second child on the way. He's back working in a very working class port steel town, which was shot south of Sydney. Imagine maybe Pittsburgh or Baltimore. Maybe might be maybe a little bit smaller, but a really, sort of tough town to come up in, and he's back there trying to make ends meet and provide for his family, and he's doing it tough. He's doing it tough in kind of those early 40s, late 30s, early 40s years. His glory days are behind him, and yeah, we meet a complex guy, but a highly well-moraled man. His sense of right and wrong is very intact. He's been a provider and a protector. He's an older brother to his brother Malin, and they've come up together without parents. So he's had to sort of grow up very very quickly as a young man. But he's a complex dude with a big heart, and I think that's fun to play.
Absolutely. And the fighting scenes are fantastic and super authentic, but they wouldn't mean anything if we didn't care about the characters. And especially in the early part of the film, like you said, we see how principled he is, like when he shares half of his money with his coworker and stands up for him. And he cares about his family and such. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how great the script for the movie is. It's super tight and efficient. I'm curious, how did the script evolve through pre-production, and what is it about the story that resonated with you when you read it for the first time?
Oh man. I was first given the script by the writer David Frigerio the day after I wrapped his film Land of Bad, which we shot in on the Gold Coast in Australia, also with Russell Crowe and Milo Ventimiglia and Liam Hemsworth and Luke Hemsworth and Ricky Whittle and a fantastic international cast. And Fridge was like, "Hey, I've just watched you and Russell work together for the last 2 weeks on Land of Bad," and it was Russell and I's second film, and Poker Face was our first, which he directed. And he's like, I've got this MMA script, which I think could be really cool, and I think you guys should look at. And it was originally set in upstate New York. It was originally set in Buffalo, New York. And and then when Tyler Atkins, the director, came on, we kind of looked at each other and was like, two Aussie guys don't know a lot about what it's like coming up in Buffalo, New York, but we know a lot about what it's like to come up in some of these coastal towns in Australia. And so the script was evolved into being an Australian story, or starting out in Australia and ending up an international story. Then when One Championship came on board, we had this great idea of, well, look, why don't we end up in Southeast Asia? Why don't we end up in Bangkok? And you've got this great kind of neon landscape and nightscape to really shape the third act of that film, which cinematically, we could all visualize how special that was going to look and what that was going to look like. So the script evolved that way, and then when Russell started having his input, and Tyler had some great visual ideas, the director, and the whole first 4 or 5 minutes of that opening sequence was Tyler's idea. Tyler really visualized this beautiful Wana, like a warrior going a gladiator going out into the Colosseum, which still, I mean, that was our first sort of calling card of the film. That was the first thing that people got to see of the film, and so we basically sold the film really on that first scene, which we shot very early in the piece. And then Russell came in and worked with Fridge and did his pass, which really kind of just it got a little bit more efficient and it got more potent. And Sammy's character came alive, and the relationships between Sammy and his daughter Rose, and his relationship with Patton and the backstory, all just got a little bit sharper and deeper and more rich, and evolved into what we ended up going to shoot. So that evolution was between 2022 and 2024, and we started shooting in December 2024, and we didn't wrap until a fair way into 2025. So it's been, a little under a year, and to be here now, to have this beast ready to release is exciting because we're all incredibly proud of it.
That's awesome. And I love the opening scene. I think that the dialogue is going to become iconic. If I can breathe, I can think. And if I can think, I can win. It's so awesome. And what was it like working with Russell Crowe this time around? Because you had a lot more scenes one-on-one with him. And also, was there like, were you guys more comfortable, or I guess, were you more comfortable with him now that it's been a few movies into this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, Russell is such an imposing presence
Mhm.
on any set, on any room. And he's also a, a presence that elevates and has a level of expectation of everybody around him. And he does that with great grace. But I remember my first day ever on set with Russell was on Poker Face, and it was a two-shot, a two-hander. And I walk in and he's got two cameras on me, close up and really close. And even though I was 20 something years into my career, you still get the nerves and the butterflies of not only am I working opposite Russell Crowe, working opposite Russell Crowe as my co-star and as a director, and he's starting with two push-in close-ups on my performance. I mean, it's enough to rattle even the best. But we got through that, and I really enjoyed our Poker Face experience, and then Land of Bad kind of I was very much there in support, even though I was playing the Colonel, ranking above Russell's character. I was very much there supporting Russell in Land of Bad. Then the tables were turned, in the instance where Russell was very much supporting me, and so there was none of that kind of. We were working as peers and as equals, this time around, which was a wonderful place to get to. He's still a great mentor. He still, gave me some notes in performance during scenes that I hadn't seen, and elevate you to a place that very few people get to experience when you're on set with someone like Russell. Also incredibly respectful of Tyler, who was only making his second feature film, which was, again, very, very gracious and very generous. And so the collaborative nature certainly has elevated and evolved, and maybe there's none of that fear maybe that comes in when you're a younger actor and you're going toe to toe with one of the all-time greats. By the third time around, I felt like I'd earned my place there, and I think that the scenes that go on screen, I'm really proud of.
Absolutely. You definitely held your own with him, and you were both amazing. It reminded me of like the Rocky Creed relationship, but different. And I loved it so much. And well, I want to get to like your preparation for this movie. So what exercise and work and discipline did you have to do to get in shape to maintain Patton's physique throughout the entire shooting period?
Yeah. We were fortunate enough that the film was on again, off again for,
Yeah.
for a couple of years, in that sometimes that was finance, or sometimes it was availability, or it was Russell's schedule was changing, or whatever was taking place. Because if we had gone and shot in 2023 as we'd planned, I just didn't have enough experience training MMA. I didn't have enough weight kind of physically and performatively to bring Patton to life in a way that I really wanted to. And so I ended up kind of doing three preparations for Patton James for this film. And in between when it fell over the second time, or when I got put on pause the second time, I went off and did a bunch of theater. I toured two plays back to back. And, nothing is coincidence. And I'm sure there was some divine intervention in there that was like, you just need to go back and do some really heavy lifting theatrically for 6 or 9 months before you're ready to step into Patton James. So I toured a play called The Woman in Black, which is a very classical, uh, widely performed English play, two-man play that we toured around Australia for 5 months. And that kind of just got me into the match fitness of performing. And simultaneously, over the couple of years that I've been working, I'd also put on 20 pounds of muscle and just to carry some more gravitas for Patton. So I was coming in off those things, and then really, I had to act like Russell Crowe. I had to fight like Conor McGregor, and I had to kind of try and look like Chris Hemsworth with my shirt off, all on a short turnaround schedule off the back of this play on an indie film budget, without the Marvel resources or whatever you may have, and so I just set about doing that. So that was very strict diet. I was training up to 3 times a day. I was doing so loads of cardio for the fitness, but I was doing weights to try and really just build certain areas of the body. But then I started out pulling apart the martial arts separately. So I started boxing, I started jiu-jitsu, I started Muay Thai, and I learned each of those arts separately, and then began to combine them, and training specifically for MMA, which is very much a sport of its own. Then I took myself up to Thailand a couple of times to go to training camp, not letting on that I was an actor, and fighting and sparring with professional MMA fighters in Thailand who were not gentle on me, And that's one of actors probably get handled with kid gloves around the world when they're prepping for roles and stuff like that. This was the opposite, I was fighting for my life, in some of these camps, until they realized, hang on a second, what are you doing here? Well, actually, I'm prepping for a film, and oh shit. And so the whole martial arts and the whole mixed martial arts community has just been so generous, so supportive, so forthcoming with their help and with their support and with their expertise. I mean, so gracious, which has been fantastic. And then obviously One Championship were the same when they invited us up to film the finale in Bangkok and train with some of the best martial artists in the world champion martial artists, and then film our finale in front of 10,000 people. Just extraordinary. So I trained harder than I've ever trained for anything before. So a lot of it was very technical stuff, because everyone's an expert now. Everyone's got MMA 24/7 in the palm of their hands if they want to look at it. So they'll know whether your low kick is landing, or whether your punches look wrong, or whether your rear naked choke or your das or something isn't quite technically correct. So we're very hard on a technical point of view, very hard on a physical point of view and an aesthetic point of view. But also, I had to be fit enough, I had to be strong enough, I had to turn up uninjured. I was in my early 40s when we started this shoot. I'm 45 now. I'm still putting myself back together, but you just don't quite bend and stretch and recover as well as I did when I was a bit younger. So all of that came into play, and then you're in every scene every day for the duration of a film opposite Russell Crowe. I love it. It's why I do it. I love working at that level, and I love being pushed to that degree, and I love having that type of pressure. And I don't think you can make a fight film, a true fight film, and capture the essence of a true fight film if you're not pushing yourself that hard and fighting as hard off screen as you are on.
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting that you say you were doing The Woman in Black before this came through, because it's almost like you had the drama training and the physical training. And the reason I think the performance is so great is because like you are a beast. You look amazing and the fight scenes are awesome, but also the emotions are there. Like I don't want to spoil anything in the movie, but there's a low moment in the story, like a very sad point, and you have like a panic attack in bed. And
Oh,
that was just so raw and real. It
oh,
was.
yeah, it still gets me. You asked me what drew me to the project, and I'm sorry I got so caught up in some other stuff because there's so much to tell about
Mhm.
this film. But it was the husband and wife
Mhm.
relationship that I loved when I first read the story, and as a young family, and at that point it was Patton and his wife, and that was originally written as a young son, and but it was that dynamic, that kind of supportive little capsule of us against the world that really connected me to the emotional heart of the story. And as you said, once an audience understands the meaning behind those punches, or the meaning, or what's at stake for these people with those punches, then each punch means so much more. And for me, this was so much about, family and identity. It was about a man, in his early 40s, struggling to reclaim his identity and his purpose and his place in life, which can often get lost. Zach, maybe you may be a little young to understand, but when you become a father, or a husband, or you're caring for your parents who are aging, or there are all these kind of things that happen around this time in life for a lot of people. A lot of men can lose their purpose and lose their identity and lose their way, and we're more accustomed to seeing it perhaps in military and combat veterans, or in Australia, and I'm sure in this country as well, but we have a lot of athletes that really struggle to transition out of high level sport, in their 30s, more often, having had this whole personal sort of identity and and kind of purpose linked to that. So this was about a man too, just really finding his purpose and fighting for his purpose and his identity.
Absolutely. And you made it like very relatable, I think, to a lot of people. I think they're definitely going to resonate. I want to ask you about the stunt work in this movie. And I know that the fight choreographer was Bren Foster. What was it like working with him? And did you do a lot of your own stunts? Because I imagine if something goes wrong, you might, be out of the movie for a while or you can't shoot. So what
No,
was
absolutely. I worked on a series called Strike Back for many years here in the States, and Strike Back was high octane, high action, and they always wanted a camera on an actor doing the stunts. They didn't want to. We didn't have time, didn't have the schedule or the budget to retake things and put stuntmen in and da 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 da. So I'd been well accustomed to getting in there and getting my hands dirty and getting in and doing and putting sort of body at risk and whatnot. This was the same in that I didn't I had a fantastic we had a fantastic stunt team. I had a fantastic stuntman, Mick Gale, out of Sydney. But I said to him very early on, I hope this is the most boring job for you, my friend, because I want to be in there. I've trained for 3 years for this job. I want to be in there doing as much as I can. So, and that was the case. And Bren and I had done a couple of movies together. We did Infinity together. We did Osiris Child together. We've been good buddies for a couple of years. And he's also, a multiple world champion martial artist. I think 10-time Taekwondo. I think he's a double black belt in jiu-jitsu. I mean, Bren is an ex-professional fighter. So when he came on board to play Xavier, he was like, "Listen, I think we're going to be better off if we choreograph this stuff together, and I use my team and his family and his martial arts school to elevate and bring everything." So we'd had some fantastic training and some fantastic MMA teams on board prior to Bren coming on board, but once he came on, it was he and I digging in. I was at his gym every day for hours on end, training beforehand, turning up, doing hours of choreography and rehearsal, then leaving, then going and training again, and we both got families and we both got young kids and businesses, the business to run and all that sort of stuff. So it was big commitment, big effort, but we looked at each other and said we want this to be the best, most realistic, most intense MMA ever seen on film. That was our goal, and I think I can confidently say I think we've achieved that. I'm going very close, if not.
Absolutely, I think so. You mentioned before that it was an independent film. I think you guys had the best of both worlds because you were able to make it independently and make it like super authentic. But then now it's a studio movie because it's going to be with Lionsgate in the US. What was it like working with the producers? How did they take it from being an independent film all the way to a worldwide theatrical release?
Yeah, extraordinary team of producers. John and Mike Schwartz out of Australia, Tim and Dave Frigerio here in the States. I was EPing as well.
Right.
Tyler Atkins. So real. Everybody was bringing their strengths to it. Everyone was bringing their network to it, and so we were able to kind of pull in all these favors. I was able to bring in an introduction to one championship, which was fantastic. And again, I think that's something really unique that we haven't seen on screen for a long time. There's so many fight films end up in Vegas. And there was originally a version of this film that did that, that ended up in a world title fight in Vegas. But when the opportunity came to do something completely fresh and different and had a whole new sort of landscape on screen, we jumped at that. So I would say it was a very we had kind of all these different markets. We had our Australian producers, our American producers, and those that were on the coal face. Tyler and I there every day. And so it worked. And so then, the goal is to elevate an indie film, or to have an indie film that elevates and looks like a studio film is an incredible feat given what we had to work with, and the parameters that we had to work with, and the obstacles we had to overcome. But also then when you add in the Russell Crowe factor and the Luke Hemsworth factor, and this fantastic cast that we've got, it opens some doors, and it gets some attention, and it's up to us then to provide something that is going to convert that attention into screens and into audiences. And I think the quality of the film surprised people, that it's so much more than a fight film, and it's so much more meaningful, and it's so much more emotional, and it's so much more affecting. So yeah, once our producers sort of made people aware of what we were doing, it was up to Tyler and I and the whole cast to convert, and I think we did that.
Absolutely. And it's cool that it's an international team because I think it's going to have a lot of broad appeal. And also it's interesting that like I think MMA is probably more popular now than it ever has been. So I'm curious, did you grow up like playing sports or martial arts or anything like that? And also you don't look 45. I thought you were much younger.
Thank you. Oh, I'll take that. I'll take that. Thank you, mate. There's a few
Yeah.
grays in this goatee today. I did come from a sports background. So I grew up on the beach in Sydney. I grew up. My dad was from New Zealand, so I grew up playing rugby like every Kiwi and Aussie. I then went into, and I was in surfing and in the water the whole time. And then my sport growing up was actually triathlon. So it was swim, bike, run. And then, Australians, we play every type of football and then cricket and everything like that. So, but triathlon was specifically what I was going to do, and I actually met my first acting manager at a triathlon in Sydney, and I got picked off the side of a road when I was 16 years old and said, "Why don't you come and try some acting or some modeling or something like that?" I was like, "No way! I'm going to go and be an athlete. I'm going to go and study." I was going to go and study like commerce or something really boring like that. Funnily now I'm producing. It's like, well, it's not that boring. It's quite exciting. It was a good background, but yeah, it was through sport that I started acting, and I started out in soap, in 1998. And so, that's been an amazing kind of journey to be still feel like I'm at the very beginning of a career. But
You mentioned about like you weren't sure if you're going to be an athlete, and then you got into acting. What is it about Australian actors that makes them so great? Because it's not just Russell Crowe, it's Hugh Jackman, Margot Robbie, Nicole Kidman, from Warrior, Joel Edgerton. Like, what is it in the water down there? Is the drama
oh,
schools like are the
oh,
drama
look,
schools?
there's definitely a great drama
Yeah.
school, background down there. It's very different to the US, and it's also very different to the UK. So we're very,
Yeah.
I think, very distinctive, flavors of actors that come out of each country. But look, we certainly have a physicality, and I think that's very just by the very nature of growing up in that land, and the harsh sun and the animals that are going to kill you, and being the most remote island on Earth and all that sort of stuff, that it breeds a vitality and a hardiness. And then I think it's the ambition of the performers that come and succeed over here in the US. There's a certain type of performer that comes over and really thrives and wants to work at this level and wants to go through the challenges of converting a career from the US or from Australia to the US, and there's a certain type of work ethic that comes with that, and a certain type of understanding of US culture and whatnot. And I love it here. I've been, fortunate enough to be in the US since 2010. Went home to Australia during the pandemic when my son was born and whatnot. But I'm a proud green card holder. I love this country. I love LA. I love the creative center of Los Angeles, and in the same way that I love New York, and I've shot movies in Florida and central Pennsylvania, and I've got to see places of this country that very few Aussies have probably ever been to and seen. But I absolutely love it here, and I want to keep making movies here for as long as I can. But there's a kind of work ethic and a hardiness and a real sort of vitality that I think that resonates on cinema and in film, and I think that's why. And look, we've got to thank the generation that really paved the way for us, which was, Russell, and it was Nicole Kidman, and it was Hugh Jackman. It was the late Heath Ledger, who was the first of my generation, who was light years ahead of anybody of our generation, what he was doing performing wise and what he was doing character wise. So Guy Pearce, Naomi Watts, we owe a great debt of gratitude to that groundbreaking sort of generation that paved the way for the rest of us. We're very grateful for that.
That's awesome. Are there any underrated Aussie movies that people should check out? Because we all know Mad Max, which is great, but what are some hidden gems?
I mean, obviously, hopefully everyone here has seen Animal Kingdom. You'll see Joel Edgerton, you'll see Guy Pearce, you'll see Jackie Weaver, you'll see Sullivan Stapleton, who's a good buddy of mine. Warwick Thornton is a fantastic filmmaker. Go and see a bunch of Warwick Thornton stuff. Ruben Guthrie, I really love. Patrick Bramall has done such a great job over here in this country recently with Colin from Accounts, but he's an extraordinary comedic and extraordinary film actor as well. I really liked. In terms of filmmakers, Nash Edgerton's done some great stuff out of Australia with Joel and the Blue Tongue Guys. Wayne Blair is a dear buddy of mine. His film The Sapphires with Chris O'Dowd was fantastic. John Bell recently made a film called The Mugai, which was based on an Aboriginal Indigenous demon sort of story that turned into a horror thriller, which I was really impressed with, and I love John to bits. And then there's some of the classics. We've done some great Australian classic war films because our history is so steeped in our wartime history. We're a young country, but you go back and you look at films like Breaker Morant, you look at films like Gallipoli. Those films, particularly Gallipoli, talk about the loss of innocence of us as a country in that sort of wartime period. And it really was that for a young country bathed in sunshine without a care in the world. Gallipoli's a special one. And then Russell's film, The Water Diviner, is
I
similarly
have seen
special
that
as
one.
well. Yeah, it's really special. Really special.
Yeah, yeah, no. I mean, all great, sound like great movies. I'm gonna add them all to my.
I went down a rabbit. I went down a little flow of films then. It's just, and I'm sure I've missed so many that I love. One of my favorite films when I was a lot younger was a film called Siam Sunset, which was written by a writer called Andrew Knight, who's remains one of Australia's most prolific screenwriters. Yeah, man, there's so much because our landscape is so often a character in Australian cinema. It's a really harsh and unique landscape, and the people that live there are very unique from a global viewpoint. Yeah, man. Rabbit Proof Fence. I don't know if you've seen Rabbit Proof Fence, Philip Noyce's film. You go back through Philip Noyce, Bruce Beresford, Peter Weir. Anyway, sorry, I'm going. There's plenty for people to dig in there. Yeah.
That's awesome. No, this is good because I like new recommendations. This is all stuff that Americans should all check out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I
So many. So now I'm just racking my brain on other ones. I wish I could have. I'm gonna have to. Yeah, I'm going to text you a list, man.
Yeah, I want to ask one more thing about your workout regimen. So, like,
Mhm.
what was your dietary plan, and how did you, manage to have like good food that like tastes good, but also, high protein, getting in shape? What was your like meal prep like?
I cooked it myself.
Good.
I mean, I was. Everyone talks about the training. They talk about the physical stuff. No one tells you how much washing you have to do when you're doing 3 gym sessions a day, and I'm going to pick up my son from school, and I'm driving across Sydney. It wasn't method as such, but I was living the fighter's life of going. I was doing all my meal prep. I was doing all my. I mean, I was walking out the door with bags of food, bags of training gear, gym gear, boxing gear, grappling gear, all my Muay Thai pads, stuff for my sons swimming after school, and then whatever else I had to do, and just bags of food and drinks and supplements and so I was walking out the door at 6:30 in the morning, getting home at about 8:30 at night, absolutely exhausted. So super high protein. I was quite a large caloric deficit. I was I was probably aiming for 2,500 calories or under, which sounds like a lot, except I was burning so much. So I was still in a huge caloric deficit daily, but trying to eat as much protein as I could and loads of like supplementation of aminos and glutamine and things like that so that I wasn't catabolically ripping through muscle. So the first time I prepped for this film, I think I lost 20 pounds in a month, but 14 pounds of it was muscle. Okay. So I had a real big learning curve. So second and third time around, I was really trying to hold the muscle on and strip the fat off, but then also have my brain work because I had to learn the nuance and the intricacies of the choreography. So when you're in this caloric deficit and you're exhausted, but then you've got, three martial artists and Bren Foster telling you the really intense but highly technical MMA sequences, and your brain's going, just give me some sugar, so look, a lot of chicken, a lot of steak, a lot of eggs, a lot of spinach and greens and stuff like that. I was big protein shakes, like three eggs, triple scoop protein, water only, because there's no wasting calories with no oat milk around here. But yeah, it was Protein City.
That's
Yeah,
awesome. Yeah, no,
it wasn't pretty, but it was Protein City.
it's a lot of hard work, and honestly, what you eat is probably as important as how you work out. You mentioned that you went to Thailand for the one championship scene. What was it like being, and you also trained there, right? So, like, what was it like? Did you get to experience the country and the culture at all while you were there, or was it just work, work,
Yeah,
work?
oh, absolutely. Thailand is so special. It is so unique, and their style of fighting and fighter is very unique. Muay Thai is such a spiritual aspect to it, but it is also devastatingly violent. And when you're using, elbows and knees, as well as everything else, it's an art that is designed to cut you open and make you bleed. And it's a really tough, hard, uncomfortable but beautiful martial art in Muay Thai. So those two things were stuff that I really drew on for Patton and for the film. I spent a bit of time in Thailand. Russell and I got to go to some of the One Championship fights when we were up there. We went to the Friday night fights at Lumpini and met Chatri and the One Championship team up there. Before we really started prepping, I took myself down to Koh Samui to Super Pro, a gym in Koh Samui for 2 weeks with a buddy of mine, an actor called Warren Brown, who was in Strike Back and in Luther, and is also a two-time amateur world champion, Muay Thai champion. So Warren and I went down there and trained incredibly hard, and that stuff just added all the authenticity to it. Then when we were actually shooting, we're up there for 8 days, and I got to do some preparation with Tawan Chai and Superbon, two of the biggest one championship athletes and two of the most famous one championship athletes and MMA, kickboxing and Muay Thai athletes in the world. And then I got to walk out in front of 10,000 people on fight night. It's the closest I'll ever come. I mean, no one gets to experience that. I got to play Rage Against the Machine in front of 10,000 people in a packed stadium and walk out in the shape of my life and walk down into the cage. Like, I will never, as long as I live, I will never forget that feeling. That was incredible. Walking into that cage, getting an understanding of what professional fighters go through and get to experience, particularly at that very, very top level. I've got to do some cool things in my career, but that will be a standout. That will be just a stand. To hear 10,000 people screaming, cheering every punch, every blow you're throwing. Amazing, man.
That's awesome. And I bet it's like, all right, we got one take.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, I injured myself quite severely in that night, at the end of that Friday night. So we were shooting the final sequence we were shooting over 5 days. We'd shot the Friday night in front of 10,000 people was at the end of the fourth day, and we had one day left to go. And on that night, by that time, I'd already broken my nose, I'd broken some other bits and pieces. But on that night, I actually tore my adductor off the bone. I had a like slight pelvic fracture, and in that moment, I had to think, oh, have I dislocated my femur? Have I cut myself open? And in my brain, I'm going, we've waited 7 months to be here tonight. You got two cameras on you. We've got one take. It's like 1 in the morning. 10,000 people are about to leave. You can't like stop and go, oh, I've just hurt myself, guys. Can I have a second take? It's like you just in that moment, everything sort of flicked through my head. I was like, you just got to keep going. And so I didn't realize the severity of what I've done, and so we walked in and out of the cage, down the stairs, with 10,000 people cheering, and I realized the next day that I'd torn my adductor off the bone and fractured my pelvis. But you just you just do it in the moment. So yeah, it was a few injuries and a few scars. But when we shot the rest of the movie, the 6 weeks of filming back in Sydney after that, I shot a lot of this movie with a leg that didn't work.
God, what? And I mean, I imagine that's a lot of pressure because it's like all these people, their jobs, like, we gotta make the movie, we gotta finish it.
Well, it's
Damn.
just been such a challenge to get this film made. We've got all those pieces to come together for the finance and Russell's availability and all the locations and a one championship fight and all these things. I wasn't going to derail that by saying I had a sore leg. There was so much more at stake. So we make it work, we get it done, and I got the rest of my life to recover. I must give massive props to Mick Gale, who I mentioned before. He jumped in
Mhm.
and was the one throwing some of the final punches that I'll let people, I won't give any spoilers away, but he jumped in and saved my backside there at saved the movie at the very end there. So he went from not being very busy to being very busy on that day of shooting. And then we went back in time and went back and shot all the drama. So a majority of this film was with some sore bits.
Yeah. I guess it's a sad thing, but also it's like I guess it made sense watching it on screen because then you looked like the most impeccable shape like by the end. So
Yes, yeah, yeah. The timing just worked out really well. We had Russell for
yeah.
2 weeks at the beginning, then we had a bit of a hiatus over Christmas, and I was able to train. We shot the one championship stuff in January, later January. So I was only training through January. Then we had another small hiatus, which we were always planned to have before we shot all the drama back in Sydney. And it just so happened that it was during that hiatus where I was injured, so I had 2 weeks to recover, and then we're back to shooting the drama. So it all worked out just impeccably. It was like I said, there's no such thing as coincidence, and I reckon there was a little bit of divine help as well.
Every movie it's like a miracle if it gets made because there's so many moving parts. Like you need to get the investors, but then you need like the star like Russell Crowe attached to get the pre-sales, and then you have to be able to shoot it in a country like Australia to get the tax incentives.
15 years of work that somehow has to like converge and pass through the eye of the needle, which is the time of shooting the film, which may be 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks. And then it goes out into post-production and sound and mixing and VFX, and then and if you're lucky, distribution and theatrical release and all those further things. But the actual shooting of the project, getting to day one to set or getting to wrap a film is like is this convergence through this tiny little aperture, for the course of 6 or 8 weeks. So when you get an actor that turns around and goes, "Oh, I got a sore leg, I'm not going to do it today," you're like, "Dude, do you have any idea like what it's taken to get here?" So the reverence that I have now for cinema and the reverence that I have for this art form and from producerially and as an actor performatively now as well of going, you got any idea if actors knew any idea what it took to get on set that day and to and what a privilege that was. I think maybe a lot of us had approached it a little differently.
Absolutely. And it's honestly inspiring the way that this movie was created and a lot of independent films. I
Yeah.
love how you said about how you appreciate America. I'm actually from Dubai.
Oh
So I
wow.
mean it's very inspiring what can happen in this country if you work hard enough and
Oh, totally. But also, the huge expansion of film and film
Mhm.
opportunity out of the Middle East and the UAE and all that area at the moment. We've got friends in Dubai, friends in Abu Dhabi, friends in Saudi, all in the film world, and there's all great opportunity around the world. But this is still the what feels like the original epicenter of what we do and what we love.
Or I also think this movie is going to do very well in the UAE and Saudi because they love MMA and everything.
I gotta say, it's the first time in my career I have ever witnessed an international cut through quite like this. When Lionsgate released that first teaser trailer,
Hmm.
I've had projects released in America, I've had projects released in Australia or around the world, New Zealand or England, but the way that this released on the East Coast and then here on the West Coast and then Australia and then the UK and then overnight was like Asia and India and South America and the way it just traveled like wildfire around the world was something that I haven't quite experienced before. And I think it comes back to obviously the MMA being, probably the biggest universal sport in the world right now, alongside, you know, soccer, football, or something like that. But in terms of visibility, it's second to none. And you throw in Russell Crowe, and he's got a bit of cut through as well, and you throw in, we have a saying in Australia that may be a bit different here, but that is you can't polish a turd. And when it comes to a script, you were talking about a great script. That's where it starts, and it's got to start with a great story and a great script, and then all those then pieces stack on top of that. And so thanks to Dave Frigerio, we had a great script to start, and we could see where it could go. We could see the potential, and you could elevate those bits. If you start stacking those elements on a script that doesn't have the structural integrity to hold them up, if you start stacking directors and cast and pre-sales and ambitious schedules and locations, if that script, which is the nucleus, which is the base, which is the trunk and of the story and of the process, if that doesn't have the strength and the weight and the integrity to hold those elements, then it's not gonna stand up, and sadly sometimes people don't realize that, or people don't, or they ignore that until release, or sometimes it's during shooting, or sometimes it's in post when they go, it's not gonna land. Thankfully, we had all the elements, and those elements have led us to having a really strong, structurally sound project that holds all those elements up and rises above, I think, expectations.
Absolutely. And it's going to be a huge hit. I know it. When you finally got to see the film in theaters, how did it feel watching it? Because, you give your performance, but then it's sort of in the hands of the editor and the director. What was it like seeing it all cut together with music and everything?
I must pay huge praise to a couple of people, but Todd Miller, who cut Land of Bad, edited Beast in Me, and did an extraordinary job. I'm a huge fan of his. He did an incredible job on Land of Bad. He's done another incredible job here, especially, being able to cut really specific, nuanced drama scenes and high level action, intense MMA is a real skill. So I sing his praises. And then Brian Kachia, who did our score, incredible Australian composer. DJ White Shadow came in and did some stuff with the sound as well. But and then the post and the sound design and the guys at Spectrum in Australia, when those punches hit, the whole cinema reverberates and you feel it in your chest. And it's like when I first saw it, I think the first scene you might remember, and people might, when they see it, but the first time you see me throw a punch is on a red punching bag in my garage, in Patton's garage. And I remember the first time I experienced that, and the whole room shook. It sounded like thunder when this guy punched. And I reached over to Tyler, the director, and I kind of grabbed him by the arm. I was like, dude, I think you might have just made me a career. Like you just sell straight away that this guy is a beast, with the sound design and the way it was cut and the way it sounded. It would like just hit you in this deep, bassy kind of chest thumping sounds. Like, oh, I really look like I can punch. So it's all those elements come together, and it was still so cellularly ingrained in me. I still cry every time I see it. There's still so much muscle memory from what I put into it, and things that I found really emotionally connective for Patton. Are still really really potent for me for sure.
Yeah, and there's some moments with slow motion punches in the climax where I'm like, I don't know how they did this.
I mean, they just punched the heck out of each other, is
Wow.
what they did. Brandon and I were like, listen, man, this is what we want to do. And we've got gloves, we've got some wraps. But I was well, I was beaten and bruised every day. Like we were covering up my real bruises to put on fake ones. I've never had a job like that before.
Yeah.
Like, hey, dude, your nose is crooked today. Oh, yeah, I didn't quite block up. I got the choreography wrong, and I didn't have one hand up, and I got punched in the face. It's how it works.
Well, sir, if you can't tell, I'm a huge fan of this movie. I want to
Oh,
thank you for taking the time to do this interview. I think it's going to be a huge hit, and I hope to have you back on for your next movie. Before we go, where can people find you on social media if they want to keep up to date with everything you have going on?
oh, man. Well, thank you so much. An honor and a joy to chat with you, man. And independent film like this, even though we've got this wonderful big Lionsgate release, it lives and dies by
Yeah.
supporters like you and by word of mouth, and we put our heart and soul into this. So to have this feedback coming back is wonderful. Thank you. I'm on Instagram at Dan MacPherson, DanMacPherson. I used to be on X. I'm not there anymore. So if you find anyone that's saying they're me, it's not me. But yeah, Instagram is probably the best place to get me. I'm pretty open. You'll find me. But man, it's been lovely chatting, and I really appreciate the support.
See you
I'm going
again.
to text you. I'm going to text you the list of Australian films, and I look forward to chatting you for the next one or a
Uh,
sequel.
and once again, I hope you all check out Daniel's brilliant performance in Beast, which will be released in cinemas on April 10th in the US and April 23rd in Australia. Thank you all for listening to this episode of the Cinema Flow podcast. We'll be back next week with more fun movie chats, but until then, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.